Been a little bit since I've done one of these, so I thought I would record one of these videos where I record a screen, basically it's being static, but I'll show you a couple of things throughout, and as always, I'll put a link in the description to a few of the things I'm going to talk about. Wanted to talk about a little bit of the state of the channel, but also a couple of different topics that caught my eye. And it's been kind of interesting. When I look overall out there in the landscape, I do pay attention. I get a lot of inspiration from YouTube. I kind of read the room as far as looking at what kind of different content is being put out there, the volume of it, how many people are posting, and if you've noticed, it's been a little bit of a slowdown as far as a lot of that's concerned. Because in a lot of ways, it's kind of a quiet period. What's funny is at the same time, and we talk about it a lot on the live stream Fridays, 8 p.m. Eastern time. But when we talk about it on the live stream, we talk about looking at a lot of different card shows. I'll see some card show vlogs, even though those have slowed down as well. But even talking to folks that do go to shows that I know go directly, don't necessarily make videos, they find that a lot of them are still being very busy, and people are still interested and participating in the hobby from that perspective, even though they're being a little bit more cognizant of their dollars, and as such, they're being a little bit smarter with their money, which is not a bad thing at all. And that was kind of my experience at the end of last year when I attended that smaller show that was still very well attended. And I felt like if people priced things appropriately, there was still plenty of opportunities to move cards in both directions. And that's kind of continued forward into the first part of this year. And what's funny about it, and I guess one way that it's kind of manifested itself is that even though we don't necessarily have the same amount of dramatic content, even the newsy stuff really hasn't happened not too much has happened with it, because we had the little Tops Industry Summit thing where they did a lot of different announcements. And I watched some videos based on talking about that. But when I listened to it, I didn't really think there was anything in particular that I felt was worth spending much time talking about beyond kind of the surface level stuff. And for that, we kind of touch on it during the live stream. And I also want to talk a little bit about what some of the stuff I want to do on the channel as far as that's concerned. But overall, it was like the perfect venue for it because I didn't think anything in particular was particularly earth shattering. Fanatics talking about different things that it would like to do, and they've talked about things they've wanted to do since they acquired the licenses and since they acquired Tops. So I expect them to keep making announcements. Obviously, they did state there was going to be a big announcement next month that is going to be the biggest announcement in a generation, whatever that's going to be. And we have plenty of time to speculate on that piece. So I'm not too worried about it from that perspective. It's still interesting, but it's not something that necessarily is urgently requiring a lot of discussion. The other piece of it is the different brands that are being discontinued. And that just means to me that down the road, they could always bring them back. But outside of something like Gold Label, which I know has a little bit of a track record history, opening day, Tops Fire, which is interesting, but not necessarily something that I would concern myself with. Obviously, there are fans for those brands, so for them, it's kind of a sad thing to see the brand go away. But I don't think it's necessarily going to go away forever. There's always a possibility that down the road, Tops could do something very similar to Chronicles, where they could bring back some popular subsets or bring back some of those brands in that capacity. That's always an option. I think that's one thing Panini did that was very intelligent is coming up with a brand that's kind of a catch-all that allows people to enjoy different designs on a scaled back level. But at the same time, I guarantee you they're going to make a bunch of other products that'll kind of take up the difference. So, they kind of cut down the amount of products, and then I'm sure they'll find other ways to kind of beef it right back up. So I don't think that's going to, I didn't think that was too much craziness. This past week's live stream, though, we did have a little bit of fun as far as the SP Game Used Legends or SP Legends. I forget the exact name of the branding off the top of my head, but we did have a little bit of fun with that one, and I'm looking forward to that one. So that one's going to be releasing this week, and we're going to see how, based on the checklist and based on the odds of things, of how that's going to play out. So I'm sure we'll talk about that this week. And that kind of plays into the idea here that this week is going to be an interesting one in the sense that I don't really see anything crazy as far as news-wise is happening. The same way it's been this last several weeks, but at the same time, a lot of fun little things, at least as far as the channel is concerned, and fun little kind of the inside jokes that we like to play on. The Aaron Rodgers saga is potentially coming to an end as he may finally meet his destiny in following the footsteps of Brett Favre, which would be kind of fun. I'd love to see if he ends up with the Jets, because the big news story today was that he was allowed to talk to the Jets, and if that becomes a deal, the Favre trolling jersey will be out in full effect on Friday. I can pretty much guarantee you that. But in addition to that, something I'm looking forward to is that tonight is the start of the World Baseball Classic. It's been years. I do enjoy the World Baseball Classic. I think it's a lot of fun. And Team Panama did manage to qualify, so that's great. And in the group, they do have as part of that group the Dutch. So game one, we're going to have Cuba taking on the Dutch. And then tomorrow, two different Panama games, including the primetime game at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Team Panama taking on the Netherlands. My declared arch nemesis. They don't even know they're my arch nemesis, but they are nonetheless. I shall be rooting against the Dutch on Wednesday night, so it's going to be a lot of fun as far as that's concerned. But that's more or less kind of fun stuff for the channel, and we'll have a little bit more fun with that on Friday. I can pretty much guarantee you that. The memes will be going in full effect, I have no doubt. Regardless, though, I did want to talk about a couple of things that are also going to play into kind of what I've been noticing as far as the YouTube sphere, which I mentioned a little bit earlier on. That's why I say we're going a little old school here, where I'll show you a couple of things. I'll include some links to some stuff, and then just kind of generally rambling about a couple of different things. And towards the end, I'll also talk about some ideas I have of some things I'd like to do with the channel, and I'd love to get some of your feedback or thoughts on this. So you can kind of let me know at that point. So I do want to shout out a couple of channels, because one of the things that I've noticed, and Sports Card Radio has been doing this as well, and a lot of other channels have, so to their credit, I'll give them credit for that. I've noticed a bit of an upsurge, a little bit of an interest in the whole idea of, reselling and flipping, which is kind of a fun 180 on how some people were really upset about reselling and flipping. But at the same time, when people are looking to take some of the variety of cards that they've accumulated over time, even if you're not looking to make it a full-time job, you're not looking to make it a part-time job, you're not even necessarily looking to make it a side hustle, but you're just looking and realizing that you might be card rich and cash poor in an environment where you'd like to have some cash, then you're looking at it and going like, do you really need all that stuff? I can speak just as a collector standpoint. I'm not trying to build a store out here. I have zero interest in doing that. And frankly, I'm too lazy to. However, with that said, that isn't to say I haven't accumulated enough stuff over here that isn't serving a project or a set that I'm working on or whatever. And in that instance, it's just taking up space. And if I can get a little bit of money back for that, it allows me then to go and pick up things that I want to get and work on the projects that I want to work on. So from a collecting standpoint, it still makes a lot of sense. But what's funny, because of the way that the prices have come back down, is that now you have people having to settle for these smaller margins and having to try to do it on volume, which very much goes back to the classic way that the whole, turning the inventory over, so to speak, was done back then. Even when somebody wasn't trying to be a dealer and they just wanted to buy and sell a couple of cards to make a little bit of money to fund their collection, that's how you did it. You did it in volume. You'd buy collections or you buy bulk lots, piece them out a little bit and get your money back that way. And in turn, you'd be able to then use that to go maybe get another lot. And if you wanted to scale it, you'd buy additional lots, get the proceeds, take some profit, and then buy more lots, which would allow you to do it in volume. Now, one of the ones that I'll include for you, I didn't link it here, but I will include a link to it, is that on the Bench Clear Media site, a couple of weeks back, maybe a month back, they actually had a live stream where they were talking about eBay reselling and giving some great tips and tricks. So that's why I say, I feel like the theme has been brewing the last several weeks. Sports Card Radio is leaning more into it, and obviously they've gotten some pushback. How dare you sell cards? Which is, again, we talked about in the live stream. I think is perfectly fine, and at least they're advocating for the idea of these cheap cards that allow you to make these small margins, but then you have a more sustainable model. If you're not trying to buy $1,000 card and trying to make this big money out of it, it's a hell of a lot easier to buy $500 or $1,000 card lot that is comprised of a bunch of different cards, and then make your money, selling these things piecemeal. It is more work. Let's get this right. It's way more work. And a lot of people don't want to do it. But that's the reason why those opportunities are presenting themselves, because when you're paying $500 or $1,000, you're not paying $500 or $1,000 for $500 or $1,000 worth of cards. You're looking for multiples of that, and you're looking to pay a fraction. And at that point, that's where your labor and your effort allows you to potentially get a little bit out of it, but you're not going to be making these gigantic margins. You're not making 5x, 10x. You might in the aggregate if you add it up enough, but individual card wise, you're probably making 10, 20, 30%, and you're starting to add all these things up, and over time it adds up. And that's how you make a multiple just on volume alone. But anyway, I wanted to talk about that, so I'll include a link in the description because I thought it was interesting. I thought they gave some really good tips, and it was Ty from Bench Clear, as well as I want to say Bo from Million Cubs Cards or 1 Million Cubs Cards or something like that. But they had some good tips that I thought were really good. I also want to shout out friend of the channel, Baubles and Ball Cards, who actually is starting up a separate channel from his regular Baubles and Ball Cards. So 540 Flips, because this is talking about Goodwill thrifting and a lot of that kind of thing. So literally the channel just started, so I'll include a link to it for you if you want to support it. But at the same time, this is buying not cards necessarily. This is miscellaneous stuff. Cards is easy enough. If you've been around the card hobby long enough, you can do a lot of that. But this is just buying all kinds of stuff at Goodwills and different lot sales, estate sales, and all that. I actually watch a lot of these reseller channels myself. I get some entertainment out of them. And if you're ever curious, I can try to recommend a couple for you. But the point is, I enjoy that kind of content because it is interesting. Even if I'm not necessarily going to go do it myself, I'm not going to go hunt at Goodwill for this stuff. But I know there's stuff there. And I know there's stuff that people are interested in. So I always think it's one of those things where if you're willing to put in a little bit of extra effort, there is opportunity. And if that is something that interests you, then there's plenty of content out there that can serve that for you. And if you're interested, like I said, YouTube is a great resource for this. And I just want to support a friend of the channel. I'll leave this one here for you, but I'm also going to recommend one for you that's more in the sports card landscape. So let's go over to that one. So we've got JMax Sports Cards. So back in the sports card realm here, Let's talk about JMac here for a moment. If you follow this channel, what you're going to realize is that he's actually doing a very good job explaining and outlining through different videos, scaling up a sports card business. So if you're more in the lane of sports cards, then this is really good for that, because you can look, even see here, Sports Card Talk Live from a dealer's perspective, Sports Card eBay resellers live stream. Like, the content is catering itself to this category because a lot of people have been more interested in that. Over the years and the time that I've been in the hobby, I've dabbled in this for many years. That doesn't mean I don't have things that I can learn. But there's a lot of things that I can inherently do, and I'll share with you a little story of one. But I think JMac is providing a very nice resource here, talking about some of these things, answering questions, and doing that in video form. I do recommend it to you if you are interested in it, and I'll leave a link to this channel in the description for you as well, so that you can check it out if you are interested in that kind of thing. And either way, it's good sports card content. Again, if you're just looking for sports card content, I'll recommend it for that as well. Now, before I go to the last piece, I did want to give you a little story. As I said, I have been myself also scaling up a little bit. I've always had stuff on eBay, like literally at all times, going back several years. Even through the whole pandemic period, I bought and sold some stuff. That's always been a viable way of making a little extra money on the side. That's something I've always enjoyed doing. But it's not something I've necessarily concerned myself about. Again, I reference my laziness. I just don't have the energy to put thousands and thousands of lots up there. However, if you do, there is opportunities if you're willing to put in that kind of effort and time. However, on a smaller scale, that doesn't mean I can't still see some opportunities here and there and take advantage of them. And for me, it's a combination of COMC, being able to pick up certain items that are a little bit cheaper and then submitting them to COMC and then doing my selling through that platform. In addition to also good old-fashioned eBay. And again, over the years, I've done a lot of eBay sales that way, but that isn't to say you still can't understand that there are opportunities to streamline things a little bit more. One thing I never took full advantage of, and I'll just give you as a story, one thing I never took full advantage of is a lot of the discounted shipping that you can do through that, especially when I have to ship internationally from Canada down to the States. Anything you can save on the shipping is money that you get to keep and is back in your pocket. Now, the whole taxes and everything, that's a separate conversation that I'm not going to have with you, but just keep in the back of your mind that if you do decide to proceed along that path far enough, you're going to want to keep that in the back of your mind. I'm never going to recommend that you try to skirt or evade your taxes. Do what you got to do, and that way you can keep chugging along without having to worry about it. But this is not the place for that, and I'm not going to be able to help you with that. So I'll leave it to others who are better versed to be able to explain that to you. Regardless, though, there are little ways that you can streamline, save a little bit of money, and I think the key to all this, regardless of what you're trying to do, is that you win a lot of these deals on the purchase. The better you can buy and the smarter you can source the cards or items or whatever it's going to be that you're doing, the better off you're probably going to be. So that's really the only tip I would give you. The rest of it, as I said, I'll defer to some of these other folks who have been doing it in greater volume or at a bigger scale, because they're going to be much better versed to be able to give you better details and also better specific advice than I'll be able to. But over my time, I've done a little bit of that, and there are still opportunities out there. I had a card that I actually purchased back in the fall that I knew I was going to throw in the box for a while and come back to later. And I actually was able to purchase it for $9.99 back in October. And that was one of those 1999, 2000 Upper Deck Quantum cards. It was a numbered Paul Correa Quantum out of 100. And fortunately for me, I realized as soon as I saw it, it was a buy it now for $9.99. And I go, that's way too cheap. Paul Correa was one of the stars of the 90s. He was very popular. The Anaheim Ducks were actually quite popular. I remember watching people with jerseys and jackets, and Paul Correa was one of the stars that made it attractive for a lot of folks in that time period, especially if you knew 90s hockey. So he's one of those guys that still stands out, and he's a Hockey Hall of Famer, even if he's not a top tier one. But a lot of great memories that a lot of people have of him. So when I saw a card out of 100 from the 90s for $9.99, it was a no-brainer for me. So I ended up putting it up on eBay. I put it for a little bit higher than what I paid for it as an auction, a 7-day auction. I put it there for $12.99, and for the majority of the 7 days, and I ran it for 7 days, and the majority of the 7 days, nothing happened. It was kind of quiet. Nothing went too crazy. But as the days started to go by, I noticed that the amount of watchers was steadily increasing. And I actually had also left open the option to have a best offer, just in case somebody wanted to throw a number at me that I was satisfied with. With about a day and change to go, somebody actually did come over the top and say, hey, what about $20? Which wasn't a bad offer, but it was one of those things where they waited until a little bit late. If they had done it near the beginning, I would have given it a little more thought. But I was looking at how many watchers were on that. Again, you don't have to monitor your eBay lots this closely, but I don't have that many going on at the same time. So I was able to just quickly check on it from time to time throughout the days. But as I was watching the amount of watchers that it had, I thought, you know what? I'm going to kind of take my chances. I'd rather just see what happens and let it play out, especially since there was about a day and change left. So towards the tail end, nothing seemed to be going with it. I did have a bid, and then I had another bid. So it was at about 13 bucks and change. And I was completely okay with that. If that had been the result, so be it. You know, I wasn't going to worry about it too much because I didn't pay that much for it in the first place. And that was the key of my point. However, I did suspect that there might be a little bit of activity towards the tail end as people did their snipes. And I thought that might be the case. So I'll show you the result. As I said, I bought it for $9.99 plus shipping, and shipping total it ended up being about $14. I bought it back in the fall and then left it alone and came back to it later and listed it just this past week. And here, in open auction, it ended up selling for 43 US, plus $6 shipping. So just shy of $50 total. And then I have a slightly discounted shipping, so the shipping cost covers it, which is great. And then this person should get their stuff, and hopefully they'll enjoy the card. But that's a fun card. 1990, 99, 2000, Upper Deck Marquee Attractions Quantum Silver. So that was out of 100 back then. And it was a great card. It's one of those things where you got to kind of know what you're looking at. Nothing crazy as far as that's concerned, but it's a nice card from the time period. And I knew that that's something that might be interesting for some folks. And again, you're not always going to be able to find stuff like that necessarily, but if you know what you're looking for, you can see opportunities like that. I bought some lots here and there where I wanted a card in the lot. That's actually the reason I bought it. But the other stuff, then I said, okay, well, if I can get my value back on the other stuff, then I consider it good. And I was just shooting to break even. But more often than not, I come out a couple of dollars ahead. And that's usually enough. I'm not sitting here again trying to run a full-time business. That's not my concern. I'm just trying to enjoy and get enough money back for a lot of the stuff to be able to kind of go onto the next little deal that allows me to kind of self-fund some of the hobby. Traditionally, my ROI on the hobby has always been bad because, as I said, I like to buy more stuff than I actually end up selling. I'm trying to help the ratio a little bit right now, put it a little bit more even-handed as far as that's concerned, but that's just me focusing in on that specifically. So that part is just me having a little bit of opining on the kind of shift I've seen in some of the content towards some of the reselling, giving some tips and stuff, and hopefully some of those channels or links that I provide you can be of some service. And if you can get something out of it, don't ask me any questions about it because, as I said, even though I've been doing it, I'm very good at doing it on a very small scale specifically for what I'm doing. I would recommend reaching out to some of these other resources that are probably better versed to give you more details on how to try to scale it up if that's your desire. However, with that said, I want to move on to one more thing that I wanted to talk about. This is kind of a random thing that's really niche and specific, but it also plays into kind of a point that I wanted to make about some content that I'd like to do on the channel. And that is that here in 411 Mania, I wasn't familiar with this website, but I looked it up in a couple of spots and I found it. So AEW has been added to Upper Deck's Versus System tabletop card game. I had no idea what this was, so I'll be completely honest with you. I had to look it up. So apparently it is a card game, which is interesting, and 1,014 ads here, which is wonderful. However, apparently Upper Deck has this 2PCG tabletop card game, and apparently they use a couple of different properties. So it's basically a card game not dissimilar to a Magic, a Pokemon, or something like that, because you're building these 60 card decks of supporting characters, resource location, plot twists, and equipment. Now, if any of you are familiar with it, WWE has had this kind of product in the past, years and years ago. I think it was called WBF Raw Deal at the time. And even WCW back in the day had its own version of this through Wizards of the Coast, funny enough. And it didn't last very long. I want to say it was WCW Nitro. But they were basically cards like this, where you had some characters and some different aspects of it. I remember I've actually got some decks of it that I was able to get after the fact, including one sealed, because the nostalgia was there. I remember that product when it originally came out, I want to say around 2000-ish. But I think it's kind of cool that that AEW is apparently going to have that. But one of the things that I saw that I fixated on here is that you're going to see fans will see their favorite wrestlers, including Jericho, Bryan Danielson, MJF, John Moxley, Sting, Darby Allin, Britt Baker, Jade Cargill, Chris Stanley, Thunder Rosa, Orange Cassidy, and Malachi Black. So a lot of different characters that I like. So for me, I'm just going to keep an eye out on this. And presumably this is going to come out, I guess, in the fall, August 2023 release. So for me, I think it's a very niche product. I don't necessarily think these type of products in wrestling haven't necessarily done well over time. And I'm not going to argue with you that there's going to be much value in it, to be honest. I just think it's neat from the perspective of somebody who collects some of this stuff. So I'll be keeping an eye on it for that purpose. I just don't expect it to go too far or be short-lived because from what I understand, I hadn't even heard of this whole Versus universe that Upper Deck has. Even though they've got other properties, I guess Marvel and some other ones that they do with this kind of treatment with, I hadn't seen it before. So it's one of those things where either way, I don't care. As long as it's got some neat cards that feature some of these characters, I'll still be interested. So for me, that's just going to be something that I'll keep an eye out for. Now, the other piece, and part of the reason I wanted to bring this up, is that something that I'm kind of eyeing. I've already been doing a lot of videos and different topics on some of these wrestling cards because I have been collecting them and enjoying that aspect of it. Now, this is where I kind of wanted to get a question that I want to ask you. Now, I actually have another YouTube channel where I spend a little bit of time talking about wrestling, more so over there. However, on this channel, I talk about the cards because when I get cards in for a mail day or something, then I'll definitely talk about it. And when I get a chance and a new product is coming out, I'll bring Billy Cilio on or somebody to talk about that. That's fun. And I have every intention of continuing to do that. However often that comes up, it's kind of ad hoc. It's a sporadic thing. However, the question that I have, and this is something that I'm kind of kicking around, I haven't committed to it yet. I wouldn't mind doing a more regular video or like a podcast style thing where I talk about wrestling cards specifically. Now, here's the thing, and this is where I find it a little bit tricky, and that's the reason I mentioned that other YouTube channel. This is where I want to kind of ask you a question. I am still going to make videos where I think it's appropriate and something that either it's coming from a collection perspective or something where I think there's an interesting topic that I want to talk about. However, if I decide to do something like that that's a little bit more regular, my question is, does it make more sense to have it on this channel where I talk about my collecting and sports cards or trading cards in general? Or does it make more sense for me to kind of shuffle it over to the other channel where I'm already talking a little bit more wrestling anyway, and then just stick to pickups and specific collection related stuff on this one? So either separate it or just kind of include it here. It would be kind of a bonus video. It won't necessarily be every week. It'll be kind of however makes the most sense for me. If eventually I've got enough to talk about there, or I decide to make it a little more regular thing, then it'll be a supplement to the regular videos that I would make otherwise. The other videos wouldn't change as far as what I'd end up doing. I'm just kind of curious about that. And the reason I kind of posed that question is that even though the last couple of years it wouldn't seem that way, I actually don't have any regular videos that I do on this channel aside from the live stream. The live stream is kind of the only thing that's scheduled every week, and then whatever else comes of it is kind of a bonus. Even this video is not necessarily something I had pre-scheduled. I just decided to do it tonight, and that's what worked out. So it's one of those things where it would be kind of interesting. I'd love to have something else that's kind of scheduled some point during the week to have as something anchoring on the YouTube channel itself. And then anything else will be bonus, ad hoc. If I'm doing impromptu or if a news item comes up, I can talk about it. That's great. But all that stuff has always been kind of ad hoc depending on what happens. So I just would like to get your opinion. If you made it this far into the video, I appreciate that. So thank you for that. But otherwise, I'd be curious if something, even if you're not interested in it, you can just ignore the video. But it's something I'm wondering if it would make the most sense to put it here, because I do talk about cards and that portion of the collecting here as well. Or if it makes more sense to push it over to that other channel and then just direct people that way if that's what they want to hear about. So no decisions today, but I'm just curious if you have any feedback as far as that's concerned, and I'll happily take it under consideration. Anyway, so that's it. I wanted to talk about a couple different things that I had on my mind. More videos will be coming up on the channel as I kind of warm up to some of the other things that I'm working on. Let me know also if you want to know some of the adventures going on as I try to move some of these items and buy some lots here and there. It won't be a regular feature of the channel, but I'm more than willing to talk about my own experiences and kind of what I'm doing. But again, it's very small scale compared to some of these other channels that I'll direct you to. Regardless, thanks for listening, and I appreciate the feedback. Like if you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much, and we'll catch you in the next one.